for around 30 long years and worked upon sustainable livelihoods in ecological stress situations in rural and urban areas through participation of community institutions. He has been part of Asian Cities Climate Change Resilience Network, the Risk to Resilience Project, and Climate Smart Disaster Risk Reduction activities. Without wasting much time, I would request Dr. Shiraz to inaugurate our workshop by sharing his wisdom with all of us.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Very appropriately started with the prayer of abundance. And actually, we are talking the natural resources and the abundance which the Almighty has given all of us. And thank you so much, Professor Sridharan and Sonal Tiwari ji, for giving me this opportunity for being with you all in this very interesting and much needed course on the riparian ecology and the ecosystem services and the cultural connect, actually, which you have just explained. I am honored by this association and will be happy to share some of my experiences. I'm not presenting any slides, but I'll try to share some of my practical experiences which evolved over a period of time working in the field, especially in this eastern and the northern belt of India, where most of the rivers are flowing through Nepal Himalayas, and the whole cultural context of this region is because of the rivers and the rivulets which is flowing through this area. To begin with, I'll share some of my experiences, like one experience which I remember while working in Bihar for government of Bihar when they were trying to document some of the indigenous practices, the traditional knowledge of people living in this area, how they are coping with the floods and disasters. And I was part of this process, leading this process of documentation of indigenous knowledge. Later, it was published as Dharohar, as one of the coffee table book, which Nitish Kumar inaugurated. So in one of the village, actually, which we saw was, the women, actually, they had a practice that they treat the rivers and the floods like the rivers actually treated as mother, and the flood coming or the river flowing in a way that it is depicted as something like they are coming to their naihar. Naihar is the parent's house. So treating the rivers as the mother or the women, and that women actually is coming in form of floods to the naihar or their maika or their parents' house. And then if they stay longer, they have a very unique kind of worship or prayers, which they call Jata and Jatin prayers, when they request the women to go back to their parent after living in their in-laws, to go back to their in-laws after living in their parents' house for some time. So, I'm sharing this story, how closely that belief system actually worked, by which the people have survived, they have lived with the floods, they have lived with the rivers, and how strong is the connect between the human being and the rivers. That has been the tradition of this region. And there are a number of such practices, such belief systems which exist across whole of northern India, across the river basins in India. I'm not only talking of northern India because I stay here, I live in this region, but it is everywhere in all the river basins. And our weddings or deaths or even births, everything actually is linked somehow to the river system. Our food systems, the kind of diversity which we enjoy, the paddy varieties, and so on. There are a number of things actually which is linked to the river systems and the river basins actually that provide and flourish with the abundance of this resource and the biodiversity. So with this cultural connect, actually, Uh, if we remember, almost 9,000 years back, when the agricultural crop started to be grown, and the people actually they started their habit from a nomadic nature to more sedentary habit. They adopted sedentary habit, and they established themselves near the rivers, because rivers provided irrigation, rivers provided fish, river provided navigation, and so on. So this is how this civilization has started, and how agriculture and agriculture-based livelihood started. So this is how the people are connected to the river systems across various river basins. With this, this whole human being and the river relationship was based on a respect to the natural or the ecological context. The river ecosystem or the river ecology was always part of the life of people. And this is how it evolved. That river as a system, and not as a system actually, as an ecosystem, was treated as something actually which provides a livelihood, which is a live system, which actually contributes to the people's lives. And when we talk of river as a system, it is not the river stream, water stream, but it is an ecosystem which involves various subsystems. Subsystems like land, the water bodies, aquifers, flora, fauna, surface and groundwater resources, and so on. So there are a number of subsystems within this overall holistic ecosystem, which is known as river ecosystem. And all this, actually, the subsystems have been interconnected, have been intercomplementary. They contribute to each other. The water bodies, the oxbow lakes, and so on, they provide the water recharging capacity, the groundwater recharge, the excess of water, increasing the water holding capacity of a particular region or a particular basin. All this is contributed by the mix or interconnectedness of all these subsystems which existed within the overall river system or river ecosystem. And that is how it is connected. And we will have to keep this in mind while we are planning our development or talking our governance systems and so on. This whole ecosystem, the holistic ecosystem which the river makes, that provides a number of services. The services which are related to provisioning services in form of food, in form of fish, in form of other aqua product. They also provide the supporting services, the silt, the fertility which is provided to this region. In fact, this region, the northern region actually, which is dependent on the river ecosystem, is a very high population density. And why the population density is high? Because people have migrated in this system because of the fertility of the soil and abundance of water which existed in this region. So this is how these rivers have helped people, and they have attracted people to come and inhabit in this region because this provides the livelihood opportunities. Now there is a separate story that people are migrating out from this region because of various distortions which has happened recently, last 20, 30, 40 years. Then it also provides the regulatory services, the whole pollution load, how it is decreased, the dilution of the pollution load, and so on. So the regulatory services are also provided, and the cultural services. One example I quoted in the very beginning, how the people are connecting themselves and their livelihood, their culture, their belief systems are built around these river systems. So all these services, the provisioning services, supporting services, regulatory services, cultural services are provided through these river ecosystems, which have been a holistic system of various eco subsystems. So this is how this is connected, and this is interconnected. The third point actually, which I wanted to elaborate was that water, I mean, that the shift in the priorities actually that changed the whole narration around these water bodies or the river streams. The shift actually taken water as a resource, as a physical resource that prioritized over the natural ecological context. and that also compromised the e-flow or the natural flow of the rivers. And that actually is the cause of the present day problems or the present day conflicts. So water, when it was treated, when it was recognized that this is an important resource, then it was taken as a resource, as a physical resource, and the priority was given to exploiting these resources rather than giving the priority to the ecological context of the natural ecosystems which happened. And the three main areas of interest were hydroelectricity, irrigation, and flood control. So these three components actually, they took the narrative from a ecological perspective to the resource perspective, and the rivers became more kind of river streams or the water streams, which were the physical resource provider. Almost 200 years back, if I'm not wrong, in whole of South Asia, large-scale infrastructure projects started around these rivers in form of barrages, in form of dams, in form of embankments. And that actually started controlling the rivers and the controlling the river ecosystems and also the water which existed in these water. And that also divided the communities, the rivers into different segments or fragments. So the impact of this shift in the river ecology, the resources over ecology, and also the large infrastructure project, that actually caused various changes. One major change was the fragmentation of the rivers. So people now with diverse interest and the diverse location, they actually look the river as something actually which can provide their own resources. So I mean, it's a limited kind of a reductionist approach which was started because of this large embankments of the large infrastructural project. That was one change which occurred. The second also, that the public narrative also changed. You go to Kosi Basin or any river basin, and you can find that people now are interested that how much they can control the river. The two side of embankment, which was constructed in 1947, 1950s, early 1950s. Now everybody is asking, and one example actually which we observed there was like the river which has almost the width is almost 13 to 14 kilometers. Anybody knowing here the Kosi Basin, the ecology of river basin of Kosi, they know that, I mean, the width of the river is quite large. And Atal Setu was formed almost 4 or 5, 6, 7 years back. And that actually narrowed the whole river into a 2-kilometer span because the bridge has to be constructed. And this actually caused a number of villages which are now submerged into the silt, which is coming from the uphill in Nepal. Although the bridge was built, but now the public narrative has almost changed. Everybody is demanding that now the river should be narrowed down in their locations also. So this kind of infrastructural project, which hardly recognize the role of the ecosystem or the ecology of the river, that caused distortions. And now everybody is demanding for those kind of changes which can occur because everybody has their own interests. The contractors and the engineers have their own vested interests. The politicians have their interest, and now the elections are lost or won on these pretexts that, I mean, the river can be narrowed down or not narrowed down and so on. And the embankments is a public demand which is coming from the communities. So these changes have also changed the public narratives, and that is the major concern which is occurring in most of the river system. And the third thing is that the manipulation across the river systems. Now the river courses are changed here and there very often. And that is also something which is very alarming, that it is causing the disruptions in the ecology of the rivers. So this is also one of the major concerns which is there, that all these river courses are being manipulated according to the interest of development or according to the interest of the local people. So, I mean, that is also one of the major concerns. Now, with these changes, actually, there are impacts. The impacts are in form of like changes in river courses is very frequent now. The river courses are changing their courses. Their routes are being changed artificially in a manipulative way. One. The second is the water bodies actually, which have been part of the river ecosystem. This is getting shrunk in a very fast way, and very fast the water bodies are being shrunk. So the water holding capacity of a particular region or the ecosystem services which were provided by these water bodies, that is also being impacted, adversely impacted. The small rivers, one of the major problem is that the smaller rivers are dying. And we have seen that even in Gorakhpur region and this region of Trans-Saryu belt actually, almost 18 rivers, which were small rivers, they have vanished now. So these small rivers actually, which were contributing to the larger rivers, and also they were the tools for draining out the water from this region when the excess water came. So these smaller rivers are now gradually dying, and that is a major concern which existed that disrupts the whole ecology of the region. So this is also one of the reasons. The next impact is in the groundwater. Groundwater recharge is decreasing because of the shrinkage in these water bodies, oxbow lakes, and so on. And the cities are being impacted. The urban centers are being impacted because of this shrinkage, because the no water days or the lowering of the groundwater table and so on, that is also increasing gradually in the cities. So, I mean, all these impacts, the adverse impacts are causing because of the changes in the water ecology or the water ecosystem or the river ecology. Now, since 1960s, we have observed that there has started a global criticism of this reductionist approach with growing social unrest and the degradation of the ecosystem around many large-scale water projects, asking for water management beyond these reductionist approach. So this is one of the positive thing actually which has occurred after 1960, that people have gradually realized that the impact of these major infrastructural uh, uh, projects actually which cause the reductionist approach of controlling the river or controlling the water systems as more as a water as a physical resource rather than considering the larger component of the ecology of the river. That is something actually which is happening here. The next point I would like to highlight here is that while on a yatra in the West Rapti River from Rolpa, the originating place of the Rapti River in the uphills in Nepal. Incidentally, this is also the Rolpa is also the hub point for starting the Maoist movement in Nepal. From Rolpa to Bahraich, we traveled almost 120 kilometers, talking to the people how, I mean, their priorities, how the river ecology is being disrupted, and what are their perceptions around those kind of disruptions. And a very clear kind of divide which existed, which we analyzed, like there is a very clear government or the macro priorities. The macro priorities is, I mean, what we call bird eye view. The government priorities or the state priorities are around hydroelectricity, irrigation, flood control, and so on. But the local priorities, or what we call towards eye view, how the local communities feel that they need the livelihood, the food, the soil, the fertility, and so on, the aquaculture, and so on. And there is a very clear divide between and there is also a conflict actually, there's also a kind of discontentment amongst the communities that the larger or the macro kind of priorities which have been taken by the government of the state is something which has not taken care of the concerns of the local communities. The local community and their livelihood is dependent on the local resources, which is completely different from the state priorities or the national priorities of hydroelectricity and so on. So there's a very clear divide between the bird's eye view and the toad's eye view, how it is treated and analyzed at the local level, and how it is taken and prioritized at the national level or the state level. What is needed is a synergy between the two, so that, I mean, it is kind of protection of the ecosystems as well as providing the livelihood to the people who are dependent on these ecosystem services. And this also occurs across the national boundaries. We have seen in the Brahmaputra basin or Kosi basin or other river basins that how the river actually, which is flowing from uphills from Nepal to India, the river is the same, the river ecosystem is the same, but the priorities actually vary according to the national priorities. And then it is all, I mean, the river as an ecosystem also get fragmented in terms of their governance. So this is also one of the concern actually which happens. One of the issue actually which I would like to highlight here is also the urban centers, actually, how the urban centers are being impacted because of these changes in the river ecologies or the river basins and the floodplains. One of the major topic actually which is taken in this workshop also. Most of the, I mean, recent floods actually and the recent disasters in some, I would like to mention some of the cities, but there are many other cities which are impacted because of these hydrometeorological disasters. Patna is recent, Hyderabad, Chennai, Gorakhpur, Srinagar. I mean, a number of cities actually which are being impacted because of the fast disasters or the quick disruptions actually which is happening in these cities. And these disasters are mostly in form of hydrometeorological disasters, which have caused, which are actually aggravated only because of the disruptions in the ecology of the floodplains or the ecosystems which existed in these cities. You talk of Chennai, how it occurred. You talk of Patna, how the floodplain and even the riverside actually that is completely developed, encroached. So all these cities actually are being impacted because of the impact of the disasters are aggravated because of the disruptions in the ecology of these ecosystems or the green or the blue infrastructures which existed in these water bodies. So the development of the cities or the urban centers, which are treated mostly around the gray infrastructure, what is needed is also the recognition that the green infrastructure and the blue infrastructure are as important as the green infrastructure. So it is not only the flyovers or the roads or the pakka land actually which is important, but also the rivers or the floodplains or the ecosystems or the water bodies which are also important in these cities. And I come from Gorakhpur, and it is the situation of almost all the cities. We had almost 20 years back, we had almost 103 water bodies in the city. Today we have 18. So the kind of fast degradation of these water bodies is a major concern, which is increasing the vulnerability of these cities to the disasters. And these disasters are also being impacted because of the climate change impact, where the rainfall intensities or the rainfall patterns are also changing because of the climate change patterns. So this is also one of the major concern, how these urban spaces need to take care of these river systems or the water systems which are linked to these river systems. Now, one of the major issue here is also the, when we talk of urban, we do not talk only the municipal boundaries, we also talk of the peri-urbans. So how in the peri-urban spaces, these floodplains or the water bodies or the river courses, how they have contributed to the livelihood of the people who are living in these peri-urban spaces, as well as the goods and services which are provided by these ecosystem services to the local people or the urban people. This is also something which is, so there's very strong connect between the peri-urban spaces and the urban spaces. Professor Sridharan is sitting here, organized very nicely, I mean, very interactive workshop almost 1.5 years back on the peri-urban ecosystems and how peri-urban ecosystems are contributing to the urban resilience and the urban services. So this is also something which is important. And the last one or two things which I would like to mention here is that we did some cost benefit analysis of these large infrastructural projects vis-a-vis or versus the local people-driven, ecosystem-driven uh, uh, issues actually which have been taken by the people. Like for example, if you compare the embankments in comparison to the local initiative which have been taken by the communities, the very intense and in-depth series of 9 publications actually were published by EASA Italy and number of organizations who were working in South Asia, called as Risk to Resilience. And that shows very clearly that the cost benefit analysis of these large scale infrastructure project is 1:1 or sometimes even less than 1 if we take a span of 20 years or 10 years. But at the same time, the cost benefit analysis of community driven processes or the local ecology respecting processes where 1:4 or 1:3 and so on. So the cost benefit analysis, even if we compare it in complete financial terms or economic terms, even then the large scale infrastructures are not very viable, are not very sustainable in comparison to the local ecology, the local wisdom, and the local communities initiatives. And the last thing actually which I would like to hear is that from where this start has to be done. I will recommend that this start has to be made at the Gram Panchayat level or the ULB level at the smallest unit. And there one has to realize that these ecosystem services or these rivers or the riparian ecology or the water bodies, they provide the developmental needs of that particular region. And it's not only the aesthetic or the entertainment perspective which lies with these river courses of the water system, but it is also the developmental need which these river systems provide. So one has to see that how the resources like Manrega or other huge resources which are existing can be utilized for conservation of these water bodies or floodplains or the ecosystem services which can be built at the Gram Panchayat development, in the Gram Panchayat development plans or the ULB level, and how the capacity needs are addressed of the people actually who are working at this level of GPDA, of Gram Panchayat and urban local bodies. So my recommendation here is that one is that this cultural connect will have to be kept in mind while we plan the cities or we plan the urban area, we plan the rural areas, and also we talk of when we plan the governance mechanism or plan the water management issues. The second point actually, which I mean that ecosystem services are important mainly for the marginalized communities, the poor communities who are directly dependent on these ecosystem services. And one has to see that in these large scale infrastructural projects, these interests are not compromised, and that is also taken care of. The third issue is that the ecosystem services are to be strengthened and built so that these ecosystem services they provide they play the major role. The fourth is that how the macro and the micro connect is established, and the bird's eye view and the toad's eye view is synergized in a manner that it is a holistic kind of developmental, it builds the holistic context of water management and development of the people. And then in the urban areas, it is not only the gray infrastructure, but also the blue and green infrastructure, which are very important. And that is also something which is important to be considered in the development of these cities. And the peri-urban ecosystem also plays an important role. So one has to see that peri-urban ecosystems are taken care of in the urban planning or the master plans of the cities. And the capacities of the urban local bodies and the Gram Panchayat is built so that they can take up and they can initiate the processes with the local knowledge and the local wisdom which exists there. And the last point actually, the space for the innovation at the local level for development for the dealing with the floods or the waterlogging, those kind of situation is also something which is important to be taken care of. That that is prioritized in policies and the programs. So with this, I will conclude my inputs. Thank you so much. And if there is any question, I will be happy to join. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those words. You have really been kind enough to share all these stories and experience that have been gathered from all these years by working directly with river, its people, and its ecosystem. You have talked about the shift in attitude and the approach towards river as a water resource and not a large ecosystem. I hope through this workshop we are able to break this wall, break this glass ceiling, and work towards it. Moving further, we have with us our director and HOD landscape, Professor Dr. N. Sridharan. He is a visionary and has an experience of more than 33 years in the field of urban and regional planning. He is also an art curator and an artist. He has been a constant source of inspiration for all of us and has been motivating us to step out of our boundaries and to constantly push our limits. His multidisciplinary approach has helped us curate this workshop and come up with a diverse team. I would now like to request him to address all our participants and speakers.
Thank you, Richa. First, let me thank Dr. Shiraz for his very detailed description of that the complete river front. Probably many may not know his contribution has been quoted by UNDP, UNEP, UNICEF, especially for marginalization, how in the riverfront, how the people are being treated and not treated. Okay, and he's contributing quite a lot in this field, along with UNICEF in other areas. Now we also we had to welcome Sonal, Richa, and Anupama, who took this initiative. The first time in SPA Bhopal, we are starting with winter school on a particular theme. My knowledge in this field is zero. Let me accept. But within this zero, I wanted to go to at least number A or 1 to the first level. To this, we have the different dimensions of master's level. We have environmental planning, we have urban and regional planning, we have transport, we have urban design, conservation, and all. It's all now getting converged into the different perspective. But within that different perspective, how to identify yourself within that zone. Okay, that's something which is a challenge which I give it to them to come out with some issue on eco-cultural restoration of riparian zone in India. Now, I'm very happy to inform you that they have been doing this for the past almost 1 year, not only from the experts from within the country as well as from abroad, who have been continuously having lectures and other things in this particular area. So, from the bachelor's to the master's level, they are integrating, and different disciplines also they are integrating. So that's something very great, which we have been trying to do it for the past 1.5 years. Next part, which I want to talk about. River is not only as a river in terms of water, in terms of land, which we are talking about. Historically, river has been an agent to bring in the change, development, culture, future. Everything has been brought in because of the river. You know, right from Harappan to Indus Valley to Amazon to everywhere, it has been happening continuously. Some kind of innovation has been happening because of the river. Now, when we talk about the river, now the current context is that how to bring in something of innovation here through the tools which we have at the current scenario. What kind of new tools we have developed, something like GIS, how to come out in terms of bringing the tacit knowledge which is related to the riparian zones, how to bring in the cultural aspect, how to bring in the participatory approach in the entire process of the, in terms of land use, in terms of the river zone, Okay, all these things have to be mixed together and then come up with this. I'm glad probably Richa will be coming out with what are the various aspects which you are going to cover during this particular session workshop is concerned. Okay, we have been trying to approach this whole thing in terms of strengthening the whole system, in terms of dynamics, in terms of statics, how to bring it about that whole thing together, and also finally we started off with similar exercise in the studio, which approach in terms of coming out in terms of that cultural area spaces, which we talk about in terms of restoration of these cultural spaces within the land use or landscape. That's also we are trying to do that. Now, first time in the first year, we can say we can start off from this year. We are bringing the landscape also in terms of other disciplines as well. So we started opening up of our landscape department to zoology, botany, and other related thing, including cultural things, okay, anthropology and everything. We have been now exposing ourselves to this thing, and plus the conservation along with that. In fact, they had a joint program also with along with the environmental planning as well as with the conservation to come out with this. And the next issue, which is talk about, which Dr. Shiraz has already talked about, with the climate change happening, with different issues that is coming out with out of water by 2030, you know, this is going to be a big issue for that. And also with the SDGs, which you are focusing on these issues, the thing which the winter school they talked about, this riparian zone which you are talking about, is going to be a very, very challenging thing for us to learn more about it through participatory approach which we are using right now. And I am wish both Sonal, Richa and Anupama to come out with something new, and they have already identified experts in this field who are the real thing to contribute us to us, to give us some knowledge to us and educate us to make it further. Thank you very much for participating, and also we welcome all the workshop participants, and we thank you for trusting us for this particular thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insight, and we all shall try to make the most from this opportunity. I shall now quickly request the curator of this workshop, Architect Sunil Tiwari, to explain the framework.
A very good morning to all the esteemed colleagues, seniors, friends, and the participants of the workshop. I believe this is an auspicious gathering as we are we are all collected here for this cause of riverine and riparian conservation. So we have created this multidisciplinary dialogue and engagement. So I welcome all again. I also the eminent speakers of the program, Professor Vishwanath, Professor Rana P.B. Singh, Piyush Saxena ji, and other speakers of the conference. First of all, I would like to thank our director, Professor N. Sridharan, for initiating the idea and allowing us to project the departmental's programs in with the larger community. So, as Professor Shiraz has rightly pointed out, the river and riverine environment have suffered immensely because of human greed, and the statistics are just alarming and heart-wrenching. So, yeah. So I think this the right time to have this workshop, and ecologist and designer need to work hand in hand, and hence we have this. I would just like to quickly introduce our speaker. We have Mr. Leonard from Rambol Associates Singapore. He is one of the key persons who led the design of the Bishan Park, a project that has demonstrated how riparian riverfront development can be handled in a wise manner. So he is the keynote speaker of today after half an hour. Next, we have Mr. Uruma Chakravarti. She will be speaking about role of ArcGIS in assessment of hydrology and how this tool can be used to the maximum to analyze. Then we have Professor Dr. Amita Sinha, University of Illinois, and Professor Dr. Rana P.B. Singh, who will be sharing their insights upon who will be sharing their insights upon how architectural heritage or cultural heritage of the riparian can be, what is the nature of riparian heritage and how we can go ahead in safeguarding it. Uh, in the forthcoming sessions, we have lecture by Professor Arnav Das Gupta, HOD Urban Design, and he will be speaking on placemaking of eco-sensitive zones, how these places are generators and how interactions between community and the fragile ecosystem of riparian can happen. Our next speakers are Dr. Prajakta Baste and Ms. Aditi Deodhar, who have already worked on riparian. Uh, Ms. Prajakta has worked on riparian restoration of Godavari River, Nasik, and her PhD is also in that area. And Ms. Aditi Deodhar is one of the key persons behind Mula Muta River, riparian river restoration of Pune. Our next speaker is Mr. Piyush Saxeria. He has greatly communicated his understanding of riparian ecology, species ecology to the larger masses. So he will be sharing with us the insights of about aquatic species of the riparian ecosystem, namely gharials, turtles, etc., and how can we go about in conserving their habitats. Then we have Mr. Tarun Nanda from Evolve in New Delhi. He is a bioengineer, ecological engineer who has worked on various projects of phytoremediation and demonstrated how through technology one can go about cleaning of over pressurized riverine or hydrological river basins. So Mr. Tarun Nanda will be speaking. Then we'll also have Mr. Farhad Contractor. He will be sharing quick insights on how does one map riparian quickly, the floodplain assessment, and he'll be sharing his traditional knowledge of floodplain management in Indian, what we have in. Our next speaker, culminating speaker, will be Professor Vishwanath S. from Biome Environmental Trust, along with Rajendra Singh ji. And so we will be parallelly conducting 7 exercises. So they will be giving their crits and evaluating our work and enriching them with their feedback. So this is the detailed schedule of the program. We have other speakers also, which we have not mentioned. Professor Anand Vadvekar from Department of Urban Design, SPA Bhopal, Professor Kakoli Saha from SPA Bhopal, and our in-house faculty team, Anupama Bharti, Richa Raje, and myself will be taking certain other sessions. So here for the workshop is moderated in such a manner. In the first half, there are lecture sessions. In the second half, there are group exercises. So the first day focuses on understanding of river and riparian ecology. And the outcomes of the day one are mapping of riverine, mapping using ArcGIS and mapping the flow, quantifying the flow, etc. The second day focuses on assessing the riparian cultural, natural, social values of the riverine basins. The third day is on what are the approaches of ecological design. And so this will be, we'll be discussing about the green infrastructure, ecological principles, how one goes about sustainable recreational planning. Then in the fourth module, we will be looking upon various aspects of riverine restoration, community engagement, bank engineering, planting, and other aspects. And lastly, we will look into restoration case studies around the world and how. So parallelly, our students will be dealing with 7 rivers, which are mainly Vanganga River. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So these are the 7 rivers that we have chosen for the group assignments, which have been selected. Vanganga River, the Khan River of Indore, Coombe River of Chennai, Hasdev River of Chhattisgarh, then the Swarnarekha River in Gwalior, Musi River of Hyderabad, and Noyal River of Coimbatore. So these are the 7 projects which our participants will be demonstrating what they are learning in the first half, and hopefully we come up we will be, so there are some workshop modules, reading modules, and the studio faculty will be there along with in the second half with all the participants. And together we'll try and identify, come up with a more sustainable model of riparian restoration. So thank you and welcome you all again. Yeah, and I would also like to thank to all the introduce and thank to all the workshop organizing committee, which is Anupama Bharti from Department of Landscape, Richa Raje also from Department of Landscape, Kush Srivastav from Department of Landscape, Mr. Manish Dubey from Computer Center, who have helped us in organizing the workshop. So welcome you all again, and today we will be having the first session with after half an hour with Mr. Leonard from Rumball Design Associates. So I'll be sharing the links. We can join in another at 11 p.m. Sorry, 11 a.m. onwards. So looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you very much. Thank you all the guests who have marked their presence. Thank you all the students and participants. And we shall join again at 11 a.m. today for beginning with day one lecture and workshop series. Thank you.